welcome to NTD News. I'm Cindy Drucker. British Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt says Iranian authorities seized 2 oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, a British-flagged vessel and a Liberian-flagged one, both British-owned. It's confirmed that the second one has been released. Meanwhile, Iran continues to deny that the U.S. Navy downed one of its drones yesterday.
Hunt announced today that he will soon attend an emergency government session to see what can be done to secure the release of the 2 vessels. He added the ship's crews are not currently believed to include British citizens. Iran's state-run Press TV reported that Iran's Revolutionary Guards seized the British-flagged vessel at the request of maritime authorities for not following international maritime regulations. Meanwhile, Iran continues to deny that the USS Boxer, an amphibious warship, brought down an Iranian drone with electronic jamming. Tehran published video footage that it claims disproves the event happened. U.S. President Donald Trump has confirmed the incident.
No doubt about it. No, we shot it down.
Trump continued to warn Iran yet again not to push the envelope.
We have the greatest people in the world. We have the greatest equipment in the world. We have the greatest ships, most deadly ships. We don't want to have to use them, but they're the most deadly ships ever conceived. And we hope for their sake they don't do anything foolish. If they do, they will pay a price like nobody's ever paid a price.
Pompeo also confirmed the incident and echoed President Trump's offer for talks without any prerequisites.
We're prepared to conduct negotiations with no preconditions. The Iranians continue to say, well, they'll talk, but only if and only if the United States does something. We need them to come to the table. It's the right way to resolve these challenges.
The ship's seizure is yet another in an escalating series of recent maritime episodes involving Iran.
Iran unsuccessfully attempted last week to impede a British oil tanker in the Persian Gulf, and last month Iran downed an unmanned U.S. drone. Today, a federal judge ruled that the Trump administration can expand the sale of short-term, limited-duration health care plans. Those are aimed at giving people without any health insurance an affordable option. The plans don't have to comply with the Affordable Care Act, so are often cheaper than those that do. Congressional Democrats have called them junk plans, warning consumers that while they may have low premiums, they could also have high deductibles. The Trump administration says the plans are filling a need after the Affordable Care Act caused skyrocketing costs for health insurance. Customs and Border Protection reports an increase in the number of children and family units over the past 9 months. NTD's Holly Kellum has more on the medical conditions children in particular are arriving with, and the challenge that poses for Border Patrol agents.
We are being faced with a younger and sicker population this year than we've ever seen at the border before.
Acting Homeland Security Secretary Kevin McAleenan says Border Patrol agents on the southern border have spent 250,000 hours at hospitals with 21,000 sick or injured illegal immigrants since January.
We see a lot of communicable disease, a lot of severe illnesses. In some cases, we've had immediate surgery required for congenital defects. They actually came to the border to have surgery.
All these medical issues means that Border Patrol agents are being taken away from their main duty, protecting the border. McAleenan estimates that between 40% and 60% of border agents have been pulled away to provide humanitarian aid.
I am confident that no law enforcement agency in the world is providing more critical life-saving care or medical support than U.S. Customs and Border Protection.
The agency has been working on getting contractors to fill these jobs. Meanwhile, it's gotten help from the National Guard, the Department of Defense, Health and Human Services, and even volunteers. But McAleenan says that until Congress changes U.S. immigration laws that entice people to the border, the problems will remain. Holly Kellum, NTD News.
McAleenan has said that the conditions in border detention facilities are something that no American should be comfortable with. Starting today, over 3,000 federal prisoners across the nation are being released under the First Step Act. NTD's Miguel Morano has more on their early release.
And starting today, at prisons around the country, nearly 3,100 inmates are being released from BOP custody due to the increase in good time credits applied to reduce their sentences under the First Step Act.
The First Step Act, a bipartisan push for prison reform, was passed last year with strong support from President Trump and Congress. As part of the law, sentences are to be recalculated retroactively after accounting for good behavior credit that would only allow sentences to be reduced by 47 days per year before the bill. Now they may be reduced by up to 54 days per year.
In terms of the range of people who have been released, the largest number are drug offenders. The second group are weapons and explosives, and the third are sex offenders. But there's a very wide range of people who are being released.
To address the problem of recidivism, released prisoners who reoffend, every inmate will now be assessed for needs as well as risks every 6 months with a new tool called Pattern. The tool will determine the likelihood of an inmate's recidivism, and every time they are assessed, they have a chance to lower their recidivism score. Those with low scores are eligible for programs that upon completion give them earned credit time, which is used for early release into halfway houses. And to support their needs, the department said that it will put $75 million toward educational and vocational programs for inmates. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
At the end of 2017, almost 1.5 million federal inmates were held in U.S. penitentiaries. And over the last 8 years, that number has been dropping overall. President Donald Trump said he will nominate Eugene Scalia, the eldest son of the late Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, to be his next Secretary of Labor.
In a tweet last night, Trump made the announcement and praised Scalia for a life of great success in the legal and labor field and said he is highly respected. If confirmed by the U.S. Senate, the 55-year-old would replace Alex Acosta, who resigned last week under pressure for the plea deal given to sex offender Jeffrey Epstein in 2008. At the time, Acosta was the U.S. prosecutor in Florida. Scalia is currently a partner at the law firm Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher in Washington, with a range of legal experience on labor and regulatory issues. Scalia previously served as the Labor Department's top lawyer in 2002 under then-President George Bush, and as a special assistant to then first-time Attorney General William Barr at the Department of Justice in 1992.
The younger Scalia has praised the friendship between his late father, Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, and fellow justice and near ideological opposite, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And America's most valuable company, Microsoft, reported solid results from last quarter and a strong forecast, thanks to growth in its cloud business. NTD reporter Jeremy Sandberg has more on what helped the company increase its revenue up 12% from last year.
Microsoft's shares rose more than 2.6% to record highs of over $140 a share in after-hours trading yesterday, following its earnings and forecast report released after the closing bell. The company's fourth quarterly earnings report of $33.72 billion total revenue beat Wall Street estimates of $32.77 billion. Microsoft also forecast between $10.3 billion and $10.5 billion in intelligent cloud sales for the fiscal first quarter, with a midpoint above analyst estimates of $10.13 billion. Along with the fourth quarter report, Microsoft announced full-year results with revenue of $125.8 billion, up 14% from last year, and net income of $39.8 billion, up 137% from a year ago. Growth in Microsoft's cloud service, Azure, helped push the company's value past $1 trillion for the first time in April. Azure reported slightly more quarterly revenue than the company's window-based segment for the first time this year, up 19% from a year ago. In the past year, Microsoft began bundling its Azure computing service for developers along with Office and other software products and signed a cloud deal worth more than $2 billion with AT&T earlier this week. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
Under the new deal, along with using Azure Cloud Service, AT&T will pair Microsoft technology with its coming 5G network for applications needing low latency, such as air traffic control systems for drones. A young group of conservatives in the Silicon Valley is trying to help fellow conservatives express themselves in a liberal-dominated area. NTD's Eileen Eng spoke with the group's founder on where his motivation came from.
Adrian Refusade, a senior at Leland High School in San Jose, started the Youth Conservative Forum this January because he thought teens on the right needed a voice.
It's a shame for me to see a lot of my peers just kind of automatically go into this left-leaning ideology because they think they have to, but they don't.
Benson Fang, a member of the forum, said he understands the dangers of uniform ideology after studying the history of the Chinese Communist Party and the Cultural Revolution.
They tend to be very easily swayed into doing things that are not very reasonable, and they tend to lose their sense of good judgment.
In a liberal majority field, identifying as conservative can be challenging.
We've had our flyers in the urinals in the bathroom before. It happens, but we just keep persevering and we try different ways to get people engaged, like our debate, for example.
They held a public debate in May with a local leftist group called the Progressive Youth Collaborative.
What we did with them is really have kids come in and share their opinion on ideas while giving them the kind of conservative point of view on issues so they can engage with our new ideas, and then later evaluate their own perspectives and see if maybe they align with what we said.
He made it clear that they aren't trying to convert all liberals to be conservative. They simply wish to expose teens to ideas they are not familiar with to allow them to be more rational. Eileen Ng, NTD News, Mountain View, California.
Major heat wave is hitting nearly 30 states this weekend, so if you're in one of them, be prepared.
A heat warning is in effect for about 85% of the country's population. That means nearly 175 million Americans. Temperatures are soaring above 90 degrees. Even tourists from hot countries are having trouble handling the heat.
It is so hot right here. And Colombia is also hot, the city where I come from. But this is like extreme.
Experts are reminding people that this type of heat can be deadly.
Know your own body, know your own symptoms, know when you're not feeling well.
If you have to work or go outdoors, drink plenty of water and stay in the shade as much as possible. Make sure the elderly, the sick, and those without AC are checked on regularly. Never leave kids or pets in vehicles, so be sure to look before you lock. 9 toddlers have already died this year after getting locked in hot cars. Major cities dealing with this heat include New York City, Baltimore, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Chicago. New York City officials are directing large office buildings to conserve energy to prevent power outages. And safety measures are in place in Chicago.
Our highest priority is the safety and security of our residents, especially the most vulnerable. DFSS and partner agencies will be conducting wellness checks and outreach to ensure residents are aware of city-operated cooling facilities.
Heat is one of the leading weather-related killers in America, resulting in hundreds of fatalities each year and even more heat-related illnesses. Emily Ho, NTD News.
Forecasters say the heat wave will fade by Sunday night. Harrowing stories from those persecuted in China, but some British lawmakers are offering their voice for those who don't have the freedom to speak out.
A peaceful practice banned in China. Practitioners of Falun Gong, a spiritual discipline that teaches truthfulness, compassion and tolerance, meditate outside the UK Parliament. But within China, the practice has been suppressed by the country's communist regime for 20 years. At a seminar inside Parliament, practitioners of the spiritual practice shared their stories. Here in the UK, they have the freedom to speak out for those who can't.
As a direct result of his persecution, my poor father now also lost a sight in both the eyes.
Tang's father was arrested 5 times for his faith. Her case is not isolated. Falun Gong practitioners Xiao Zhengyang and Janet Feng also spoke of the brutal persecution their loved ones suffered. MP Jim Shannon chaired the seminar.
It's hard to believe that 20 years later their persecution is still going strong.
Perhaps even harder to believe are the findings from a People's Tribunal held last month, which concluded that the Chinese state has and continues to forcibly remove organs from prisoners of conscience, with Falun Gong practitioners likely to be the main supply. Professor Martin Elliott was on the panel of the tribunal.
The forced organ harvesting has been committed for years throughout China on a significant scale.
Earlier this year, 53 MPs signed a motion which calls on the UK government to condemn the alleged practice of forced organ harvesting.
The Falun Gong, they're just peace-loving people. Why should they not be allowed to live their lives? Why can they not be afforded the same compassion that they show?
It's an issue that some British lawmakers are taking seriously.
There are several members of Parliament, both in the House of Commons and indeed members of the House of Lords, who have been working together on a cross-party basis to promote religious freedom around the world, and particularly the way that the Falun Gong practitioners are affected by all of this.
There is hope that such efforts will help to end the suffering in China.
And, it's like climbing a mountain or building a pyramid. You've got to keep on adding blocks to the top.
And step by step, through protests like this one, the people here hope one day the persecution in China will end. Jane Worrell, NTD News.
And if you're in London or another major city this weekend, you'll probably see peaceful protests marking the start of the crackdown on Falun Gong 20 years ago. And half a decade ago, the first man set foot on the moon. NTD reporter Shiwen Rong spoke to one man who told us about his memory of the most celebrated events in modern American history.
The Eagle has landed.
The iconic moment when the Apollo 11 mission first put man on the moon.
I will never forget that. I mean, at some point I may, but, that'll just because I'll be old. But I remember it as if it was yesterday.
July 20th, 1969. Bill was just 17. He and his friends saw Neil Armstrong plant his foot on the moon.
And we were all very wow, this is pretty cool. And then we went outside and looked at the moon. And we thought, they're up there on that moon.
More than 500 million people were watching worldwide. For many, it was just a moment on the screen, but for some, it was a memory that is still clear after 50 years.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
When I was a kid, we looked up at the moon and wondered what was up there. And there was all this romantic feeling about it, like, what's up there? Oh my gosh. And now anybody born after that doesn't have that anymore.
For Jim, it was a big moment that he will never forget.
There was a real feeling of national pride and the worldwide pride, that we had done that.
On Friday, July 19th, President Trump honored the Apollo 11 astronauts at the White House and said the next step would be Mars.
And that's all for today's NTD News. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Cindy Drucare.